Welcome to The Safe Space, the podcast that's about those things in life that affect our romantic relationships and how we can identify and manage them for the benefit of ourselves and our relationships. I'm Yvette Johnson and my co-host is Ian Fraser. We both have a keen interest in mental and emotional well-being, as well as the dynamics that affect romantic relationships. And in this podcast, we'll share our personal experiences as we chat to a range of experts about the good, the bad, and the unhealthy of relationships. We hope you learn as much as we did from these conversations. Before we begin, though, a quick disclaimer. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not offer mental wellness advice. If you or someone you know is in need of professional help, we have some links for you at the end of the episode and in the show notes. Welcome to The Safe Space. We're talking to another author coach today, and we're very happy to meet Martin Pelders. Martin, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Yvette. Ian, nice to be here.
Welcome. Thank you.
Great.
It's all very formal when we start out.
So formal.
By the end of these podcasts, we're always like, okay, that's it. We got to go now.
Yeah, we're going to go home, we have coffee.
Yeah, that's because we share such deep stuff. Every time that someone leaves here, we feel like we've gotten to know them so well.
Yeah.
So welcome. Happy to have you here. Okay, so we were told about you that you have a history, an interesting one that you're obviously going to be sharing with us.
Yeah.
And that you also then did something amazing with your, let's say, history. And it plays an important role today, and it's very relevant. Because the background for this is that we started a podcast about relationship dynamics, the challenges that are faced in relationships.
Yes.
And it came down to if the individual's not okay, the relationship can't be okay. And then it came up that men aren't getting enough attention, that in terms of their psychological health and their psychological needs and their emotional needs.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where you come in.
Yeah, well, I try. I think we need to take it a step back, right? So relationships don't work out because of what you learned as a child, and that's where everything is rooted. So if you grew up in a dysfunctional home, then chances are pretty good that your life is going to be pretty messed up, So I always say to people, like, if you grew up in an abusive environment and you never go for therapy and you never learn, you can't just magically transform into this like stable, functional adult, that now is going to just like flourish. It doesn't work that way. So these little dysfunctions follow you along. So I always do a lot of what we call inner child work, where we take people back to their childhood and we try and figure out what happened there. Because so your first 7 years of life are going to be probably the most important in terms of learning how to function in life. That is the time when your prefrontal cortex starts developing and kind of only kicks in when you're 7, right? So you're going to learn, and I see this magical thing happening now. At my age, I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and it's the maddest thing watching your 4-year-old behave just like you. And he's adopted, so it's not a genetic thing, it's a learned behavior, right? So when I go, I always go, what the hell, man? Now my son, 4 years, he walks around going, what the hell? What the hell? And I go like, oh, dude, that's not what I want you to be talking about. And it's so true that if we lack in those first 7 formative years, we kind of take that through to our adult relationships. So the way that we interacted with our parents and our parents did or didn't interact with us is what comes up in your marriage or in your relationship. So we actually need to go right back and start working on that before we can move forward. And it doesn't matter what relationship you get into, it's always going to be a mess.
It's always going to be a mess.
Totally.
Wow. It just looks like it's inescapable. You have to go back to go forward.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's no escaping it. Everybody needs therapy. And if you were in lack, and you probably were, because you're saying it's always going to be a mess.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, let's get real. In South Africa as a country, so an interesting research study for me is one called Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's been going on for like 30 years at the Kaiser Institute in the USA, along with the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And they're adding to it. It's probably one of the most referenced studies in the world. I mean, it's been referenced like 16,000 times. And if you're into research, you'll know that like being referenced that many times is like you've achieved like, researcher, first position status, you're there, right? So my wife is a researcher. She's like very excited that she's been like cited 3 times. It's like, yes, so that gives you an idea, right? So what are adverse childhood experience? So it's a repeated occurrence. It's not like a once-off. So somebody touched me and walked away, it happens more often. It happens more than once. So, and they cover essentially 10 adverse childhood experiences. So physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, poverty, right? Addiction in the house, a criminal in the house, somebody who's gone to jail, neglect, and they go through all of those. So if you in your life have been subjected to 3 or more of these adverse childhood experiences, the outcomes as an adult are not great, right? So they're going to impact on your relationships. They're going to impact on your physical health. So because of these, we've seen a higher propensity to cancers, for instance, with children that have been exposed to 3 or more adverse childhood experiences. We've seen a higher propensity to diabetes type 2. We've seen a higher propensity to ischemic heart disease, and so it's just the outcomes, and that's the physical outcomes, are so much higher for children that have suffered abuse. Now, we don't see poverty as abuse. We don't see growing up in a fatherless home as abuse. We don't see like emotional abuse. We don't see that sort of stuff. We tend to ignore them, as you and I were talking about. You were talking about the hard and the soft abuses, right? So the hard being the physical, the sexual, and the soft, and I like it, and I did steal it very quickly, right?
It's yours.
So these abuses end up playing out as we grow older, and we need to start dealing with those. And if we don't, things are just going to go wrong.
I've got to step back for my own curiosity and talk about the disease that manifests following the dysfunction and abuse. That's a very interesting link, because it's something that I've read and listened and watched a lot of talks and books on. And that is a raised alertness, cortisol running through the body, adrenaline, fatigue, stress,
anxiety,
Absolutely.
all of those nasty things, which in a normal, in inverted commas, body would be great if you're under threat. Your body does that naturally.
Yep.
It gets you away from trouble. But to live like that for years and years, your body can't sustain it. Is that kind of the reason that you're finding these ischemic heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancers, etc.? Is that one of the reasons?
Absolutely. So if you take it, I mean, the person who kind of raised the most awareness about is a lady by the name of Dr. Nadine Burke. I think she's currently the medical whatever in California, the head of health. Yes. Right. I don't know what they call it there. And she's done some great work in the area. And what she was finding, she ran a free clinic. She's a pediatrician, and in Los Angeles, in the poor quarters, she ran a free clinic for children to come in, parents and children. And she said she gets these people kept coming in saying, my son has got ADHD, please, And so she would do the proper diagnostics, and she would go, this kid is displaying the traits of ADHD, but doesn't have the clinical diagnostics of ADHD. And she was finding as high as 98% of the children weren't clinically diagnosable as ADHD, but they were behaving as if they had ADHD. So now she was like, okay, what causes this? And that's when she got onto the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. And she explains it like this. And it's a beautiful way of kind of summing up what you just said, right? She says, if you're walking through the bush and all of a sudden you encounter a bear, right? And the bear like rears up and goes, roar. And what happens to you? Your eyes, your pupils dilate, your veins constrict, your heart rate increases. The brain starts pumping adrenaline into your system, and you're just getting ready to fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the three responses that you have. And this kind of thing only happens, well, in most people's lives, it never happens, right? But it might happen once or twice, right? But what happens when the bear lives at home? So you live in a heightened state of awareness every single day. And that's what it was like for me. It's like mommy comes home at whatever, 4, 5, 3, whatever time, and your brain starts spinning out of control. Okay, what mood is she going to be in? Is she in a good mood, bad mood? Is she going to be aggressive? Is she going to be loving? Is she going to be what? And you're 4, 5 years old. I mean, this is the sort of pressure that you don't need in your life as a child. You need to have security, love, and sustenance. Those are the 3 pillars of childhood, But you don't have them. So you start overthinking everything. You start kind of pre-planning, and you live in this constant state of readiness, ready to fight, flight, or freeze. That's what it boils down to.
And unfortunately, in the context of relationships, with that shaky home base, a child stands no chance. And as you've just mentioned now, everyone has problems. So At some point or another, it's whether that is going to be sustained through those first 7 years or whether it's intermittent and infrequent.
Yeah.
And that, I am assuming, determines an outcome in later years.
Yeah, I mean, the heavier the abuse is, the worse the outcome, of course. So if you've lived with a serious bunch of abuses, physical, mental, emotional, whatever, of course the outcomes are going to be a lot worse. Your thinking is going to be very, very different to somebody who's grown up in a very supportive, loving, caring environment.
I can't imagine that. I can't imagine what that looks like.
What, growing up in a loving environment?
Yes, loving, supportive, calm environment. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I didn't have the worst of the worst, not to degrade anyone, but I don't know what that feels like. I can't imagine that. So when I see it, I'm like, wow, that is so different. And then you find, as we were talking off mic, you find that you go and you're drawn to the familiar without even realizing it. Now I'm aware of it. Looking back, I can see. I was drawn to this because I was used to this, but this is not what I want.
Yeah.
And yet I stayed in it because I am familiar with it. So this thing of being drawn to the familiar because it's known. Yes. We are drawn to the known.
Yes.
And you were mentioning...
It's what you're comfortable with. It's what you're used to.
Yeah.
So you're naturally drawn to that. And we call it resonance or frequency or whatever. So vibrating, we all vibrate on a certain frequency or whatever, depending on your childhood experience. So you're going to be drawn to somebody who vibrates at that same frequency.
Can we talk about that for a second? Because the conversation prefaced off mic, which is now coming on mic to this podcast, we spoke about the fact that you are attracted to those people who feel safe. Can I use that term? Feel safe?
But it's your normal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What you're used to.
It's what you're used to. It's your normal.
Can we unpack that for a second and just explore? Sure. Because there might be somebody listening who's going, wow, yes, I am with a partner who is very much like my mother.
Yes.
My father. My carer.
Yeah.
Tell us about this. Unpack that for us.
So essentially, you're going to be attracted to the dominant parent. So whether it's the mother or the father, right? That is the person who you are going to be drawn to. So you will end up, if your father was abusive, then you will end up in a relationship where your partner is abusive. Whether you're male or female, we don't put any genders to this. This is the biggest mistake we make is we start genderizing this and we start categorizing, well, all men are toxic and all men are trash and only men abuse and only women are victims. Absolute rubbish, Men are more physical, women are more psychological. So they do more sort of coercive control and abuse, right? So my ex was brilliant at breaking me down all the time, constantly, right? Why can't you be more like so-and-so? Gee, they run such a successful, they got this fancy car, they got this, they got that. Why can't you be a better father? So-and-so is such an amazing father. It was that constant breakdown, verbal. It's so invasive and anyway, it's very toxic. But let me give you an example just out of my life. So naturally, my daughter grew up in a pretty crappy home. Understandably, her mom and I fought all the time, right? And eventually I divorced in 2013. I moved out. And I think part of the reason was, so I discovered much later that my ex had also been through traumas and all that sort of stuff. Her father died when she was 2 years old. She suffered all sorts of abuses. That's her story to tell, right? Difference was that I started dealing with my trauma.
And she
right?
didn't.
She didn't, right? So I was pretty open, pretty brazen. I mean, my story's out there. I don't hide anything, and I don't make out like I'm a saint. I'm 100% honest because I want to help people to overcome, right? And we were in a very volatile relationship, and my daughter grew up in this, right? So eventually I divorce, move out, and I'm working on me and it's like focused on getting my life together. And I meet this lady like 6 months after my divorce. Man, I was out to have fun. I was like going to sow my wild oats and make up for lost time and all that sort of stuff. But along comes this beautiful lady, and she's kind, soft, quiet, and gentle. Like weird, for me. Didn't understand that. What's more than that is she was quite a staunch believer, so there was no sex. I was taught from like 5 years old that sex is love. Right, through the sexual abuse and stuff that was perpetrated on me. So I constantly would get into relationships where I'd want to sleep with these women because if you loved me, you'd sleep with me, right? So that's how you show your love. And now I meet this and I don't understand this thing. It's like, no sex? What? But I still want to be with her, It was only like a year later that I realized, okay, it's not the sex, it's the emotional connection that we're looking for. So at the age of 49, I'm still growing, right? I'm still learning. I mean, big time here. But one December holiday, my ex, doing what she does, she was like, we're going to go to Victoria Falls and the whole family. And then at the last minute, she goes like, no, you can't come with us. You better go away with your dad. So I'm saddled with this girl who thinks that I'm abusive, aggressive, that I want to rape her and all sorts of things because that's what the narcissist tells the child. And she hates me. And now she's got to go on holiday with me, right? Anyway, so we kind of managed through and muddled through, and we end up, so what my father-in-law does is like every 4 years or so, he rents a couple of rooms in a hotel and he brings all his children, 4 of them, from all over the world with all their grandchildren, whatever, into the hotel, and we spend like 4 or 5 days together and we just have fun, right? So my daughter's part of this thing. And after a couple of days, she comes to me and she goes, "Your dad, these people are crazy." I'm like, why? She says, like, they're all supportive. They love one another. They never fight. I mean, this is not normal, she says to me, right? And I looked at her and I smiled and I said, no, this is what actually should be normal. The way that we did things was abnormal, right? So it was very confusing for her. And fortunately, she was young enough to grow up into a relationship where she found the normal, the loving, caring, supportive normal, right?
What a gift.
Absolutely. Still a lot of work to do between the two of us, a lot of healing to do, but at least she understands the journey, which is fantastic, and that's all you can ask for. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, more than
a
answered my question.
long-winded way of getting there.
How do you avoid? So you're saying you can't avoid having come out of
you can.
dysfunction, because if you're not, how? Only if you're aware of it and you're addressing it.
Be aware of it, yeah.
Be aware of it.
Absolutely, be aware of it. And this is where podcasts, I mean, in society today, there is so much information out there on relationships and things like that. I mean, I follow hundreds of guys on Instagram and all sorts of things. These guys have got amazing insights, and I really learn a lot from them. And we need to be open to that sort of thing. But unfortunately, what happens, society kind of has these pretexts, these norms, or these little boxes that we love to squash people into, right? So men especially, right? You're there, you don't cry, you must be tough, you can't be seen to be weak, all that sort of stuff. And the problem with that is that boys grow up with 5 coping mechanisms, right? Sports, silence, sex, addiction, and anger.
Sports, silence.
Yes.
Silence.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Sports, silence, sex, addiction, aggression. So when I talk addiction, I'm talking anything: alcohol, food, work, gym, right? It's something that you do in a disproportionate measure to what life is about, right? So everybody goes, I'm not an alcoholic, but every freaking Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they get wasted. Okay, that's a coping mechanism. You binge drink to avoid stuff, right? What is it that you're trying to avoid? You go and spend 5 hours a day in the gym. What are you trying to avoid, right? You spend 16 hours a day at work. What are you trying to avoid? And these are the things that we need to look at. Porn, another one, so you're avoiding intimacy by just like having sex with yourself all the time. I mean, what are you trying to avoid? And these are the questions we need to ask ourselves all the time. And once you're aware of the fact that you have a problem, right, and the silence one is interesting. So you get a lot of fathers who will come home and like walk into the office, leave me alone, I'm working, keep the kids away from me. Never emotionally available to the children. Why? It's easier just to be by myself, right? I don't need to deal with all that nonsense because I don't actually know how to do it, right? So those are the 5 coping mechanisms that men are given. And I always find it interesting when I say to men, I say, give me words for emotions. They always start off. The first one is always anger, right? Probably because I deal with a lot of broken ones. So it'll be anger, sadness, happiness. Basically, they'll give me 7. If I say to a woman, give me words for emotions, I'll be here until next week, And that's the difference. And emotions like colors are learnable, right? So if you only see the 5 basic colors or the 5 basic emotions, that's all you see. But when you learn that there are more colors than just green, there's teal, there's turquoise, there's, then you start learning and it opens up your eyes and you'll start seeing more colors. And the more colors you see, the more you learn. And that's the same with emotions. So we need to get men to a point where they realize, hey, not everything is peachy. All right, me sitting watching cricket, Formula One, rugby, soccer all weekend, what am I avoiding, right? Or me going and playing rugby with the boys every weekend, what am I avoiding? I used to cycle, so I'd spend 4 or 5 hours Saturday, Sunday cycling. What am I avoiding? My ex-wife, my child, because I was afraid of her. I was afraid I'd hurt her. So we need to figure those things out and then start dealing with them. And unfortunately, there's very few people who specialize in this field, I think, in taking people back, and saying, okay, let's start. How was your childhood? Because to me, everything is vested in there. Everything is rooted in childhood trauma. And all your dysfunctions all stem from that.
So, question on what you're saying, and this is only my personal experience, forgive me for sounding biased. But why does it seem to me, from just dating and meeting men and interacting with women who are dating and marrying men, why does it seem that alcoholism is so rife among men? Is it that way? Or is it just me?
Well, firstly, alcohol is a difficult thing because it's kind of illegal, and it's cool, allowed to do that. And, when I stopped drinking, I would go to, eventually, after about a year, I thought I developed enough strength to say no to people, right? And I kind of established this rule. So I would go to a party and people would say, have a beer. And I go, no, thanks, I don't drink, And they'd ask me that same question 3 times. Then I would just turn around and say, no, thank you. I'm an alcoholic. I do not drink. And I'd be very firm about it. And the weird thing is that 2 hours later, that very same person that keeps offering me a drink would come to me and go, how do you know when you're an alcoholic? And I go well, the very fact that you're asking me this question kind of, testifies to the fact that you are, right? So that's a big issue. But it's the easiest way to escape life.
Drink.
Alcohol. Of course, I go home, I get sloshed, I don't have to think about things. It's not like my problems aren't going to be there tomorrow morning, okay? And it's also socially acceptable. If I go and buy a line of Coke or a gram of Coke and snort the whole thing, that's bad, or I go use heroin or tick or cat or whatever the case may be. And people are doing that, unfortunately, with like hallucinogenics nowadays. So he's like, I'm going on a shroom trip this weekend, and if you're doing it every weekend, it's not beneficial, people. It's destructive. It's just another addiction, right? It's an escape. And guys do that. Now, the other thing, why so many men are in that state? Pretty much science tells us that in South Africa, nearly half of all boys have been abused in some way, shape, or form.
That blows my mind because you don't hear that stat.
No.
I'm under the impression that I'm thinking of girls when it comes to abuse and gender-based violence, like
But
Paula
that's the
Quincy was saying.
narrative.
Yeah, the narrative is women. Women are being abused. Women are being killed. But men are clearly overlooked. What is going on there? Can you give us some information?
So in South Africa, 44% of all boys have suffered sexual abuse by the age of 18.
That's almost half.
That's almost half. So when you go out in the dating pool, you've got like a 1 in 2 chance.
That explains everything.
If you come from a history of abuse, you're going to go to the left. If you come from a functional family, you're probably going to lean to the right. Okay. So because you have the coping mechanisms and you have the emotional quotient, you're able to kind of detect, well, this guy's full of nonsense. Let me avoid him, so I'll lean to the right and go with these guys because they're a little bit more stable. It's these things, you always date the bad boy. Well, let me tell you something. The bad boy is broken, So as cool as he looks and as suave as he comes across, he's broken. And it's all just a coat of paint on a rotten apple, It looks nice and green and it looks nice, but when you get down and you take a bite out of it, it's all fraught.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this journey that you discovered. You've spoken very openly about your addiction, your broken marriage, etc., which led you into this interesting area of discovering that 44% of all boys before the age of 18 are abused.
Yeah. Sexually
abused.
Yeah, that
Thank you.
excludes all the physical, mental, emotional.
Yes.
Right.
And then you end up in this chair on this podcast today, having helped countless people to reframe and learn. And when I say people, let me rephrase that: men.
Yeah.
To reframe and fix up their lives themselves. Our journey, Yvette and mine, on this podcast has been fascinating in that every single guest who we've had on this show has ultimately pointed to self-work before you can go out into the wild and make a relationship work. You've chosen men specifically. Let's go on that journey for a minute. My question to you is, how is it different from coaching women? And you alluded to the society. The narrative is it's always women who are abused. Tell us about the abuse of men that you come across. How bad is it?
It is, a lot worse than we imagine. In fact, more boys are sexually abused in South Africa every year than girls. So on average, 10% of all boys will be sexually abused every single year in South Africa, right? And what we tend to not look at is we framed it in terms of, well, it's men who rape, right? But it's not that. With boys, it's the woman who rape, right? So when you break it down into perpetrations or rates of perpetration, it's 41% of all perpetrators are women. 27% of the boys are perpetrated on by both male and female, and 32% by men. Right?
What?
So of the boys, the 44% of them, 20% of them were raped by teachers. Right? So we don't talk about that. So according to social construct, boys are lucky if a 40-year-old woman comes and sleeps with you when you're 12, right? But you're not emotionally ready to take that leap as a boy, right? So it's quite destructive, and that starts to shape your relationships as you go forward. So I get a lot of guys that come in, and the impacts of sexual abuse and trauma on men is essentially this: the five big ones, right? So the sex, silent sport, addiction, and aggression. Now, it's never going to be one in isolation. It's always going to be a combination of So you'll find a lot of the guys can't handle, because they were not heard as children, right? I don't want you to do this to me. Please stop. No, you enjoy it. And there's this disconnect between the brain and the penis for men, right? So your penis is telling you, oh, this is great, man. Let's do this, but your brain is going, there's something wrong with this. So it doesn't make sense. Okay. So there's that disconnect. And because these boys are not heard as victims, they go, please don't do that. Quite often they will develop anger as a coping mechanism. So when I go, rah, and I push somebody away, they can't hurt me anymore. So that somebody could be anybody. It could be your child, could be your wife, could be whomever, parents, right? So we hear these tragic stories. Well, the son beat up his mother. Well, firstly, I question the mother's, the loving, caring, motherly nature probably doesn't exist. But that's his way of saying, leave me alone. You're not hearing me. And if you don't listen to me, then I will force you away. I'll get physical. I'll push you away. So I'll either do it with my voice or I'll do it with my fists. Right? So that was a coping mechanism that I developed, right? So when things got really difficult in my relationship, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3", I weigh 100 and whatever kilos, and I got a big voice. I do. And I use that to good effect. So when they start getting at me, I turn around and go, wow, leave me alone. And then I'll walk down the passage, punching holes in doors and things like that, just to assert the fact that I'm masculine and leave me. So we developed these coping mechanisms because of what happened to us, and we use them in very destructive ways. And the best thing for us to do is to get therapy. So a friend of mine was going to launch this thing, and I was like, I wish you would. Everybody needs 10. Right? It doesn't matter who you are, whether you've grown up in a functional, beautiful home or a destructive, broken home. Everybody needs 10. 10 sessions of therapy with a good therapist. We all need that.
Launch it.
We should, yes. And it's a great way. So, I've kind of wandered off the point, as I usually do.
No, it's okay.
So,
that's what happens here.
Yeah, we go down all sorts of rabbit holes.
There's so much to be said.
It's my ADHD, go to Cape Town.
Oh, there we go. That's
Cairo.
another topic.
Yes.
I want to take two questions, if I may.
Better write them down.
No, I've got this. The first of those is the manifestation of all of this trauma in later life, and something that's not openly spoken about, and that is men's suicide. Mm-hmm. Because we're talking about people who are able to get help, who are brave enough to go and speak to somebody, who are lucky enough to hear something that triggers them getting help.
Yeah.
What you haven't spoken about is those who end their life because they feel as though there is no hope. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Suicide rates are higher among men?
Absolutely, yeah. So in South Africa, between 25 and 28 men a day will take their lives.
Are men okay?
No, they're not. They're broken. I mean, there's so many different aspects to it, and we can get into that, but it's a long topic, right? And I often get called misogynist when I talk about it, but it's true, right? Men are in a position at the moment where they're coming at us saying, like, you need to reframe masculinity. And I'm going like, but there's nothing wrong with masculinity. There's nothing wrong with femininity. We need to kind of just be who we are. But there's this constant clawing away. And now when I get 16-year-old boys come to me and say, there's no hope for boys in this country. And I go, why? And they say, because everything's for girls, nothing for boys. And it's true. And when we look at things like as basic as literacy rates amongst boys in the rural areas is 9.6%. It's not even a measly 10%. It's 9.6%. Right? The same literacy rates amongst girls in rural areas is also measly 15%, but there's a disconnect there, right? In urban areas, literacy rates amongst boys around 15%, for girls 25%. So where... clearly we're doing something wrong.
What?
Yeah.
Are we just focusing on women more?
We're just focusing on women more.
The feminist movement actually wrecked us and didn't do us as good as we think it did.
And you can see that, and there's like 50-year-old woman posting on Instagram, well, I'm all alone, and I focused on my career, and now I'm all lonely. Do you want me? Essentially throwing their legs open at everybody that will take them, Well, you cocked up. It's a bit late now. You bought the narrative, and it's not working for you, So, cool, don't cry about it now. Just like make the best and move on, right? But men have had the counter, so we've empowered women and disempowered men.
We have.
Absolutely. And we need to look at that. But that is like way off point. So why do men commit suicide? Because they don't have the EQ to be able to deal with it, right? Now, don't get this wrong. When we talk about suicide, attempted suicides amongst women and men is at the same rate. Okay, so as many girls. And the problem is it's getting younger. Eh? So 10, 15 years ago, suicide was highest in the sort of 32 to 45-year category, right, age group. Now it's come down to like 15 to 25.
Why?
Teenagers are killing themselves at incredible rates. And why, I don't know. I mean, it's getting worse, this whole, boys are toxic and masculinity is bad thing. Whereas we need to turn around and say masculinity is a good thing. Actually, when we look at masculinity, what is it? It's a proud, handsome guy who's protective and defensive and, that's it. Not somebody who's always angry and wants to, all men are rapists, all, men
abusive,
are trash, or all men are abusive, all men, my son is a potential rapist or a potential abuser. I mean, that's nonsense, So you're raising them with absolutely no hope of a future. They're just like, well, I'm trash. Okay, cool. Then I'll be trash. That's it. But then you'd add into that absent fathers, right? 62%, between 62 and 68% of all homes are fatherless in South Africa. So these men are growing up, or these boys are growing up without a role model. Add into that the abuse, the poverty, the physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, all that sort of stuff. And now we're expecting these broken boys to grow up and be model men, and it's not working. Right? You see universities, admission to university, I don't know what the numbers are, I haven't studied that up, but a lot more girls. And we're pushing. We want women in STEMs, women in this, women in that, women in that. And, look at the teachers, right? 80% of all teachers are women. So boys are growing up with this feminine input into their lives, and they don't have a masculine input to their lives. And it's not working. It's really not working. So we need to encourage boys to become teachers. We need to encourage boys to go to university. We need to encourage boys to become psychologists, for Pete's sakes, please. Because it's a field that is dominated by women, and men quite often don't want to go to a woman and pour their heart out, right? But the other issue is that if you go back to 2013 and you see the American Psychologist Association, I think it is, they started this campaign where masculinity is bad and needs to be destroyed at all costs. It's written, it's there.
It's actually so
why?
wrong.
So when a guy goes to a psychologist, they start with, well, it's because of toxic masculinity. And you're going like, I don't give a toss why, I'm coming to you with a problem, help me, but it's patriarchy. I'm like, cracky, So they're not getting helped in that sense. They're not getting supported in that sense. And we need to change the narrative, and we need to start looking at humans as humans. But we haven't. The boy child is kind of disposable. And it's gone back decades, centuries, because the boys would go to war and die, so you don't get too attached to them, right? They're the disposable gender,
so sad.
right? But it's all changed now, So now boys are not dying off at such horrific rates because there's no wars, right? And women are taking over the comfortable jobs because you no longer have to clean the cave and all that sort of stuff. You get in your air-conditioned BMW, drive to an air-conditioned office, and you sit there and you command people. So it's nice and easy. And so boys are kind of losing their identity in that.
Absolutely.
Part two of my question, and it's by no means the end of this conversation, but I feel it's important right now. If we change one person's decision to not commit suicide today on this podcast, what can people do? And I don't mean reach out to a toll-free helpline and go and speak to a counselor. I mean, what can somebody do right now?
You know what the most exciting thing that somebody can do is to start transforming their life. And you buy into this thing, and mental health is sold to you as this, it's terminal, right? So if you suffer from depression, you are going to suffer from depression for the rest of your life. Well, let me tell you something interesting. Research is coming out and that they are reversing schizophrenia, depression, bipolar, dementia, all of these sorts of things are being reversed 100%. You get guys that are coming off 5+ psychiatric medications a day are like not using them anymore, and they are happy and together. And you know how they're doing it? Diet.
What?
Well, there's a new door you've just opened.
We so need to talk about that.
Yeah. So there's a guy, now this is pretty new, it's pretty recent, so I haven't got all the numbers in my head, but I'll give you what I can remember, and I can't remember the doctor's name. But he's gone in and he's taken, I think he took 78 patients, long-term psychiatric patients. In other words, they've had psychiatric diagnoses for 10 years plus. They're on 5 or more medications per day. He took them into this thing and he said, right, you guys, we're going to change your diet. Are you willing? Yes, cool. They're all signed up for this thing. 4 of them dropped out after the first week because they couldn't handle the diet change, right? They just didn't want to do it. So great. The rest of them carried on. I think 68% of them had completely reversed their diagnoses after 2 or 3 months. Completely, 100% reversed, right? The others had reduced their medications, but substantially. I'm not talking like just, minus a couple or go down to a lower one. Discarded a lot of them and just stayed on one, right? So we get to this thing, and I've said it for years. I'm going like, if you get sick, you get better. If you are mentally ill, you don't get better. We sell in this construct that you're going to be like that for the rest of your life. And that's a problem, and we need to change that perspective, right? So what we're learning now is that your gut biome plays an incredibly important role in your brain health, right? There's this clever little nerve that goes from the base of your skull down to your gut. It's called the vagus nerve. It's the thickest, biggest nerve in the body, right? And what it does, it controls your lung function. It controls your heart, kidney, liver, all that sort of stuff. But what it also does is it absorbs nutrients from your gut and delivers them straight to the brain. Now, if you're eating crap, you don't have the right nutrients going to your brain. This is fact. We're learning this now. Now, when you go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, they go like, oh, they give you a diagnosis, give you a tablet. Not one of them says to you, how is your diet, right? How is your exercise regime? How is your sleeping pattern? These are things that we need to start looking at and becoming more obsessed about, is what we call integrated health, right? I always say this: if a doctor looks at your diagnosis and gives you tablets, right? He doesn't look at how you're sleeping, how you're exercising, what you're eating, all that sort of stuff. He's not your doctor; he's your drug dealer. And we need to change that narrative now. We need to get doctors to wake the hell up. I was going to swear there.
It's all right.
Yeah,
You're allowed.
yeah, wake the fuck up, and then start treating people holistically, and it's very important. And I think so. The first thing is realizing that you have a problem, right? Okay, I grew up in a not so cool house. I've got mental issues. I need to deal with them. Great. Who do I go to? Find a therapist, right? Get the help that you need. If the therapist starts off with patriarchy, toxic masculinity, just like, thank you, walk out, don't pay them, just leave, right? Find somebody that actually starts treating you. And this is something we've lost. And Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, he said that. He says back in the 90s, psychiatrists stopped being psychiatrists and they started becoming dispensaries. And we need to get back to therapy. This is what it's about, therapy, good therapy, right? So get a life coach, get somebody who understands the male condition and starts guiding you along that line and helps you out and that sort of thing. So that's what I do. I work with a lot of broken men, and I've seen lives transform. And the interesting thing is it's not just a mental transformation, it's a physical transformation.
Well, it's the same body. Yeah. You can't separate mental from physical.
And I always say, it's like 3 to 6 months into my program, and I run a program. It's a 20 20-step program. I hate calling it, but it is a program, and it's a pretty intensive program, and it goes through some incredibly painful things. And I do it over 10 months, so every second week. And the guys will come in after like between 3 and 6 months in that stage of the program, and they will have changed. They walk in, their eyes are bright, their skin is smoother, they walk in upright, they're smiling, you know what I mean? And then I look at them and I go, I see you got it this week. And they go, yeah, no, I got it. And their lives, literally, I mean, I've had guys come in from verge of divorce, losing everything, almost about to lose their jobs, that sort of stuff, to being happy, being home and present for their children, being promoted from just like whatever to like African manager. I've had guys who's self-employed who've completely transformed their lives. I'll tell you a story. One guy always says he would go fishing with his family. He had 2 sons and a daughter and his wife. And he says he was there and he threw his line in and he caught a fish, right? And he was reeling this fish in. And the fish got off the line. And he like went, oh man, I lost it. But he looked around and he says he saw his family like backing away, literally just like walking backwards in their eyes, this big, you know. And he says, in that instant, I realized that they were scared of me. Because before, if I went fishing and the fish got off the line, I would start throwing things. I would like throw my rod and break things and throw my chairs, and my family just would move away for their own safety and protection. He says, but now I don't do that anymore. You know, I just went, oh, fish got away. I'll catch another one. And they were like all shocked. They were like, looking at each other.
Who is this person?
Who's this person? You know, and that's after like 4 months of therapy and support, you know. So lives literally change. So start with the therapy, get people onto a good diet, good exercise regime, sleep freaking 8 hours a day, please, people. You know, you're not a hero if you only sleep 4. Nobody's, you're not Elon Musk, you know what I mean? It's just get over it, right? Most people need 7 to 8 good hours of sleep a day. They need a good diet. And the diet I'm talking about, by the way, is keto. That doesn't mean you can run out and start eating steaks all day. No, that's not what keto is. Do the homework, right? It's a lot of fat. Get off those statins for cholesterol. Because cholesterol, people, is brain food. If you don't have enough cholesterol, you start losing your memory, right? You start getting brain fog. Your bones start calcifying because you need cholesterol. It's very important, right? Doesn't mean you're going to eat 10 steaks a day, people. Don't get, you know. But cholesterol comes in many forms. So olive oil, coconut oil, avocado, nuts, legumes, all that sort of stuff. Please don't. I've heard so many people go keto and then they block themselves up and they can't poo. Need to go into surgery to get, you know, things removed. So get onto a good keto diet, but a proper one, not a all-steak one. And, yeah, your life will literally transform.
I never thought I would sit here listening to you today saying this about diet. But what you're definitely saying is that men need more attention.
Absolutely, men need more attention. We need to understand that there's nothing wrong with masculinity. We need to understand that we can be good masculine men. In fact, the world needs more good masculine men.
Yeah.
And when our examples are like Donald Trump, then please, you know, I mean, there's no
swear
hope.
I was just thinking about him as you said that.
I can't wait for his wife to write a book. Can't wait.
Oh, man. Yeah. So, I mean, that's not a good example. We need to look at good examples. And quite often we don't see the good examples because they're quiet guys that just get on with the work.
They've also been beaten down to get to the point where they are good people and they have got their stuff together.
Yeah.
And after that journey, the last thing you want to do is attract more attention to yourself. You just want to get on with what you know.
But that's so true. You know, a lot of the guys I counsel, when they get to a point, right, where they go like, wow, I want to get involved and I want to help people and I want to make a difference and I want to use my story to change people's lives. And I go, that's cool. We'll get there when you're ready, right? And then they carry on, and then like 4 or 5 months later, they're like, actually, my life has transformed so much. I don't want to deal with this crap anymore. I just want to go home and be a good father.
Yeah, where your attention goes, your energy flows, and you don't want to have to draw more of that into your life.
Yeah.
You're a very brave man immersing yourself in this world. You obviously have very, very immense strength.
I don't think so. But yeah.
Well, take it from two people looking onto you. We think you do, so that's amazing.
We need men like you because men need men to hold them accountable for themselves.
Yeah. I like, this is something that kind of sums up masculinity. Jordan Peterson said it. He says, a good man needs to be a violent man. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and all the woke leftists went,
Excuse me, what?
Yes,
beg your pardon.
yes.
Yeah.
But a good man needs to be a violent man who has it so under control that he doesn't use it unless he absolutely has to. Right? Because that's what men are, and it's a fact, and this is where things are going askew in society at the moment. It's like I walk in here, I look at Ian, he's a tall guy. So immediately that sets a boundary there's a respect between Ian and myself, where we kind of size each other up and we go like, I think, if we had to get into it, right? You probably whip my ass, but I get a good few in, right? Whereas women don't have that filter. The woman would just get in your face and be aggressive, and they don't have that in place. And that's what happens to boys growing up without fathers. They don't have that filter. So when they get into a situation, minus the filter, they start picking on people that are like, don't pick on them, right? And then they get whipped. And then they go like, oh, why? You see? So that's just a basic construct of masculinity, and that's why we need good fathers. To teach these boys like, hey, listen, I might be my age, but I'm still going to give you a good smack, because I might not be strong, but I'm cunning and I'm wily and I've learned a lot of tricks over the years. So have that respect, and we don't have that anymore as a society.
This has been so interesting, and as always, it leaves us wanting more. And we have, so many questions, and there's so many other avenues that need exploring. But I have always had the sentiment that men are being oppressed. I do think so.
Essentially. But, the thing is, we must stop whining about it and start doing something about it. You know what?
And you are.
And it's not just me. There's many people sort of standing up now. I have many good allies in this space. Craig Wilkinson from Father a Nation, Steer from Single Dads Network, carry on and on. Zane Mies, the actor from Seven Delan, he runs a great fathering thing. So there's a lot of people stepping up and doing. We see the need. But what I think we need to, as a society, get over is this us and them thing. The minute we start making people different to like women and men, and the two are at war.
Toxic femininity. And
we need to get rid of that. There's children who need to grow up to be stable, loving, caring, understanding people. And until we get that right, it's like I keep saying, we keep expecting little abused boys to grow up to be loving, caring fathers, and it doesn't work that way. So we need to, but the other issue is that we also have girls that are being abused that go into these feminist kind of networks and they just learn to hate.
Men.
Yes. So it was men who did that to me. So we hate men. All men must die. All men are trash. And I can understand that, but it's not healing. So you end up with that hatred. When I was going through my healing process, somebody said this to me. He said, hatred is a poison pill I swallow to make the other person disappear. And it's so true, right? So I hold on to that, I harbor that hatred in my heart, and it just poisons my body. And it helps nobody. It just actually kills me. So, and I got to that point when he said it to me, I was like, oh, cool. And at that point, I forgot the guy who, I kind of just forgave him. And I said, oh, you must forgive. Everybody goes, oh, you must forgive. No, I'm not going to, I want to hold on to that hatred. Well, it's killing you, not them. Their lives carry on without you. You're the one that is dying and poisoning yourself. And I kind of got to that point where I learned, okay, I have to forgive my mom. I have to forgive Gary for doing what he did to me all those years. I have to forgive the other lady that raped me when I was 12. I have to forgive the other guys that molested me when I was 8, 9, 10, 11. So, and you let it go. And then you kind of find a peace in your life. And you're going, okay, this is better. This is better than being in that constant state of readiness, fight, flight, freeze. And I mean, it was so ingrained into me that I still today find myself stressing and tense, and I catch myself and I go, okay, relax, breathe.
That's clearly you doing the work, though, to realize that you're tense, clenching your jaw, raising your shoulders, feeling tense.
Yes.
That's work that you've done.
It is work. Yes.
That recognition of, hang on, slow down, calm down. You're not in a threat situation here.
Yes, you can relax. This is a safe space. And
reframing that for me is a whole, again, another rabbit hole because, there's so much you can do to get to that point.
Yes.
But really, this has led up to the fact that if you don't do the work
on yourself
first, before you get into a relationship, or if you've come from a disastrous relationship, work on yourself.
Absolutely. I met a guy one day, he said to me, we were just chatting about marriage, and he's like, oh, I'm never getting married again. I go, why? It's like, all women. I go, seriously, how many times have you been married? He goes, 5 times. I go, and it's the woman. There's one common denominator. It's you, dude. Work on you.
I'm sorry I'm laughing, but it's true.
It's true. Yeah. And we forget that, So you get out of one disastrous relationship into the other. And this is why I say these victim empowerment centers don't work, because it's proven that a woman who comes out of an abusive relationship will go back into either the same relationship or other abusive relationships at least 7 to 8 times before she'll realize, hang on, I'm the common denominator. There's something wrong with me. I need to fix me. And when I say fix me, it's not, it comes back to that frequency. If you've grown up in an abusive environment, you're going to be attracted to people that are like the dominant parent. And you need to unlearn that. Otherwise, you're going to keep making bad decisions, keep getting into crappy relationships, and keep getting hurt.
But it starts with self-awareness, right?
Exactly. And the escape that we've had as a society today is what's wrong with all these men? Us women, we're perfect.
I cannot tell you amongst women how much that term is utilized.
Yes.
How often I've said it, what is wrong with men? What is wrong with men? And that's why we wanted this conversation. And I think that there's a whole separate podcast in forgiveness.
Absolutely.
That's a whole different
kettle of fish. Also not being the fixer.
Yeah.
It's like somebody read my book and they came, they phoned me and they went my boyfriend. And I go, yeah, well, what about you? And I speak about the resonance and, you being attracted to somebody who's like you. But they go no, there's nothing wrong with me. I want to fix my boyfriend or my ex-boyfriend or, whatever. And I'm going you can do that. It's still not going to fix you. You're still going to pick the same guy for your next relationship, right? Because you're not working on you. You must stop blaming others. Stop being the empath. Stop trying to fix everybody because that's just avoidance, right? So it's another addiction, being an empath, right? So I fix other people so that I can feel better, but I'm not fixing me. I'm avoiding that aspect because I don't want to deal with the crap that I went through.
It's a very interesting
That there is a whole other thing, right? Yeah. I mean, this is amazing. Listen, we have to cut it short, but we're so grateful. We love every word.
Probably went over time.
We love what you've said. Thank you for your time.
Can I ask before you go that you give us the name of your book for those people who would like to read it?
Yes.
And where can they find it?
At the moment it's on Amazon and it's called The Pumpkin Van.
What? The Pumpkin Van?
Yes.
See, now how would we ever know this is about what it's about?
It was, it's kind of a marketing ploy. It was like everybody goes, oh, why did you get that name? And I have to read the book to see where it comes from, right? So over the years, I've counseled people all over the world, America, England, Australia. And the Pumpkin Van is actually from a guy in Australia. It's his story of his abuse and all that. And when I was counseling one night, it was like midnight, and I was speaking to him online, and he told me about what had happened to him, and he said to me it happened in a pumpkin van. And the minute he said it, I just went, that's the title for my book. That is the title for my book.
Okay, so that's available on Amazon. We'll leave that book in the show notes.
Yep.
And if I may, the final thing really is to ask where people can get hold of you.
So the easiest way to get a hold of Martin, the life coach, is on WhatsApp. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, WhatsApp works, I think. And it's the number is is 027 or +27
+27
81430445. That. Or just send Martin Pelders 256@gmail.com. All very complicated.
Well, that's a good number to have. So thank you.
Yes. Cool. Thank you guys.
Thank you for your time and your openness.
No, pleasure. I mean,
Vulnerability.
I didn't even open about all the stuff, so that was quite...
That's okay. That's because
This wasn't easy.
we're going to bring you back for another podcast to talk about that.
Everyone's got to come back because there's so much.
There's a lot. I mean, when you do get into this, you're like...
Yeah, there's so much. It's captivating. I take a day to digest everything that after the podcast recordings in the mornings, I need the rest of the day to just digest.
Process.
Because it's so much. And I connect it to people that I've met and people that I know, and stuff makes sense to me. Light bulbs just go off. It's like a Christmas tree.
True.
You know?
True.
So.
Yeah, knowledge is power, hey?
Oh.
Yeah.
Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, guys. This was amazing.
Thanks for listening to The Safe Space. You can find Ian Fraser and me, Yvette Johnson, on Facebook. For feedback and questions, kindly email yvettejohnson7@gmail.com. If you need professional mental and emotional help, please don't hesitate to contact SADAG at www.sadag.org. Wishing you emotional, mental, and physical well-being.